Sung continued on his way and met the avatars of the owner of this territory. One of them said that he had invaded his master's territory and such insolence would not go unpunished. But he was generous, and if he agreed to become his avatar, then the host would forgive Sung his disrespect, and he would be able to step over his pride and recognize him as a valuable subordinate. The guy listened to it all the way through and started smiling. It sounded really funny to him. The avatar thought that Sung did not understand what was happening and decided to deceive him, but stars like him were very well prepared for such a scenario. The monster began to threaten Sung and said that if he did not accept the proposal of his master, it would end very badly for him because his master would come and deal with him. He began to convince Sung that his master would really come. The guy had to cover his nose with his hands because this avatar stank of rot. Meanwhile, the monster ordered Sung to obey him in order to stay alive, but Sung wanted to see their master. He started calling him himself and asked him not to hide behind his avatars. He thought that the monster had run away a long time ago and was calling his master, but he was still around. It was clear from his face that he was afraid. Sung forced him to leave and call the head of the territory. Sung got into a fighting stance and decided to force him out another way. The skeleton got scared and wanted to run away, but it was too late because Sung started his attack. He started to run, but the blast wave caught up with him and destroyed everything in its path. All that remained of them were piles of bones. In terms of complexity, it was not even comparable to Sung's training. He demanded that the owner come to him and not hide behind the avatars. All this time, he continued to destroy them. Sung said if he didn't come to him, he would be considered a coward because he couldn't even defend his territory. The meaning of such speeches was completely clear. The war between the two constellations was declared. The owner was shocked and asked him to stop. The kitten also thought that this was madness. He had even forgotten that they could follow him. The hostess added that it was irresponsible to call middle-ranked constellations to battle. The kitten, in turn, asked if it was connected with the fact that the messenger tried to deceive him. It was because of something much more important. He started all this in order to return to his origins. He began to activate his offensive and defensive abilities. Even after he fell into the abyss, Sung was never a force to be reckoned with. Being a weak man, he always struggled with enmity, but what changed after he became a star? Although he himself did not admit this fact, he was always hiding from the older constellations like the last coward on neutral territory, away from any eyes of the constellations. He had lost the meaning of fighting. Sung must follow his own path but at the same time live as a constellation. The landlord was shocked that he was ready to risk his life and fight the herald of plague and darkness, but the fact that his opponent was a constellation did not change anything. He was ready to compete with anyone, and now Sung's wish came true, and the owner of this territory appeared before him to defend it. He was very glad that he finally did not have to hide from them but could take the fight. The hostess was simply crazy about what was going to happen in a few minutes. She was very worried about her new friend. This was a monster of a completely different level, and all his previous opponents would not be able to match him, even if their forces were combined. From this moment on, Sung had to act very carefully because he was unaware of the abilities of this creature. He looked very dangerous and immediately instilled fear in his enemies. He appeared in front of avatars and those who were doomed to die. His avatars fell to their knees in disgust and said that their lord had heard their prayers. Some of them had never even seen him in person. From them came wishes for longevity and a request to punish non-believers and those who showed disrespect to him. The harbinger of plague and darkness thought that his opponent was much crazier than he expected. For some reason, the constellation, weaker than him, challenged him. The Lord warned Sung that if he loses, he will be completely destroyed. But if he starts this battle and wins, he will get nothing in return, and if he loses, he will lose a lot. But if he does not accept his challenge, then his status and reputation will drop greatly, and he will no longer have such support from the avatars. The owner asked how he dared to challenge him and called him a coward. All these long conversations were just to surprise Sung, to quickly destroy the enemy with the help of trickery. A huge cloud of smoke appeared in the sky from their first collision. In this confrontation, despite the fact that Sung challenged first, he did not let his guard down. This was his first battle against a constellation. The difference in the strength of their existence was very large. Therefore, he must finish him off quickly, using all his strength, because he understood that if the fight ends, he will definitely lose, and then his new friends will prove to be right. He dodged the blows and, in between, decided to throw a space fist that he had trained for several thousand years, adding some essence power to it as well. The Lord of Plague and Darkness had no choice but to take these blows and feel their full force. He couldn't do anything to Yansung because he was much more agile, and when he tried to land a punch, he already got hit by the guy. The hostess and the kitten watched this spectacle with open mouths. They definitely did not expect this. From the moment he was born to the constellation, he felt pain for the first time, as if his essence was simply torn apart. Other constellations rarely fought in person, therefore they had no experience, and over time their skills and reactions decreased. For him, Yansung's technique was something new and unexplored, but he was absolutely sure that it was not magic. Yansung threw a bunch of punches every minute since his ki energy did not decrease. He realized that his attacks were really working, so he couldn't lose this chance and continued to attack. Yansung even began to think that maybe the owner started to pretend to be weak so that he would attack unexpectedly. Hundreds of avatars stood on the ground and watched what was happening in the sky. They prayed for their master. Although it looked like the end of the world, it was very beautiful. The skeletons did not understand how such a miserable constellation dared to oppose their unsurpassed master. Yansung just hammered this monster into the ground with his powerful punches. He only used one punch, but it was very effective, therefore there was no point in using other abilities for now. But no matter how many blows he threw, he could still smell the smell of rot. This only meant that it would be difficult for him to defeat this monster. Yansung was already preparing for the next blow, but he saw the trembling hand of the Lord of Plague and Darkness. He raised it up and began to shout that he was surrendering. His face no longer had the stern look it had in the beginning. He begged Yansung for mercy and accepted that he had completely lost to him and was weaker. But this really surprised Yansung, and he did not expect such an act from the constellation. He thought that this was just a cunning move to lull his vigilance. Therefore, he just continued to strike and did not pay attention to his request. The owner received blows and said that he was ready to give him everything. The territory along with his avatars, anything, so that he would stop beating him. The hostess and the kitten just stood there in misunderstanding because a few minutes ago they were dissuading Yansung from starting this battle. The kitten told Yansung that the constellation was really pretending because they can't lie when they swear on their lives. But Yansung didn't understand why he was pretending to be a constellation. The kitten replied that this happens sometimes if the constellation is very badly hurt, then it can swear its life and surrender. This time Yansung believed. He stopped and no longer continued to beat the Lord of Plague and Darkness and began to smile. This victory greatly increased his strength, and now Yansung realized that he could fight with anyone. His martial arts even worked on the constellations. Although they all had different levels of strength, it was still very good news. In this territory, there were rivers of manure and buildings of rotting tumors. It was a kingdom of plague and darkness. He began to sense every avatar in this area. This was his new kingdom due to his victory over their past ruler, but now he was their king. Yansung quietly called the Herald of Plague and Darkness because he wanted to tell him something. He said that he wanted to return the kingdom to him. This shocked the ruler. He really didn't need his kingdom at all. He just needed a king. After these words, Yansung simply turned and walked away, humming his favorite song. The Herald of Plague and Darkness was still confused. The competition between the constellations was very dangerous. Both sides were at risk. The winner took everything from the loser. This was done to prevent a future threat from the loser. Completely erasing the existence of the loser is a common thing. But he spared his life and left him a kingdom with avatars. Although he was happy, he felt a sense of humiliation. He wondered who his new master was and where he came from. The kitten had not yet seen a constellation taken as an avatar. He also believed that it was not worth leaving him the kingdom, but Yansung didn't care because he wouldn't be able to rule it. The technique he came up with when he was training with Aroni was his greatest find. to get so close to the enemy that he couldn't use magic, and to not give him a chance to use the power of the essence. He understood that he would be able to compete even if he met a constellation that would be much stronger. Yansung continued on his way and headed for the next constellation. There he was greeted, as usual, not very warmly. The master of this territory did not think that it would come to him, but it seems that he had no sense of fear at all. He said that he would not be defeated as easily as that rotten weakling. He asked to prepare to face his entire kingdom. Yansung, for fun, decided to listen to him and then began to activate his abilities. He said that he was exactly counting on destroying his entire kingdom along with the Lord. After what happened to the harbinger of plague and darkness, they prepared for all possible scenarios. In other words, now Yansung had to compete with all the avatars of the kingdom and then reach the master. It took him 200 years to destroy all avatars before reaching the master. Each subsequent owner told him almost the same things. They told him that he would not be able to win and offered a compromise. Usually, when he was offered some kind of deal or compromise, he didn't even listen to it to the end because he wanted only one thing: to destroy all avatars and their constellations as quickly as possible. The next constellation was of the middle level. The preacher of truth said that the other constellations would not leave him alone. This time, a kitten appeared with him and said that their unbreakable alliance would destroy another constellation. Yansung appreciated the appearance of the kitten and was very happy to see him. This time, thanks to the kitten, he was able to win in just 6 hours. It was a record. The kitten and the mistress lay in the sun and did not envy the constellations that stand in the way of Yansung. She was sorry that she still hadn't found a way for him to return to Earth, but he didn't seem to be in a hurry to do so. He had 2 important rules during his journey. The monsters he met, he cooked and ate, and he simply destroyed the constellations. He tasted his signature dish and thought about when he would be able to return to Earth. During lunch, some incomprehensible portal began to appear in front of him. As a result, this gate that appeared in the abyss became a way for Yansung to meet new opponents. Perhaps these gates even lead to the ground, but you can check this only if you try to enter them. He could not believe that this time fortune was on his side, and he really teleported to the ground. First, he needed to find at least some people. He saw a village on the horizon, but it didn't look like Korea. But when Yansung got closer to the village, he could not find a single person because there were only goblins there. He assumed that people had disappeared during his absence. Kitten said that even though it looked like Earth, it was actually a goblin planet. Yansung had to meet goblins in dungeons from time to time. He thought they were ordinary monsters, but contrary to his expectations, they were able to create a real village. Walking through their village, Yansung noticed something. Although the goblin kingdom looked like land, it was much closer to the abyss. This meant that portals appeared there much more often. Compared to humans, goblins had been fighting monsters from the abyss for much longer. Therefore, their system of fighting monsters was much more effective than that of humans. But this system only worked when they faced low-level, normal monsters. One day, a monster came to the goblins whose strength was on par with the constellations. The goblins looked at him like a god. He could destroy several dozen goblins and their houses with one step. It was the most dangerous wolf, called the Devourer of Planets, Lupus, a monster that was hundreds of times stronger than the previous ones. This could mean the end of the goblin civilization. The Goblin King had to participate in this battle because he was considered the strongest goblin. He tried to get closer to attack. He had no choice because if he didn't fight, he wouldn't be able to look his people in the eye anymore, even if he survived. He wasn't a coward, so he wasn't going to run away from this monster. The goblin understood that this was most likely the end for their kingdom, but it had to leave a scar on him that he would never forget. But he didn't even have time to fly up when he noticed something strange near the monster. It was like lightning that covered the entire body of the monster. He himself did not understand what was happening. Of course, it was Yansung who expected to surprise all the goblins with his appearance. He had only one chance. In terms of combat power, this monster was comparable to a medium-level constellation. It was not a constellation because its existence was not focused on one thing. He had only one chance to stop him, and he must use it. Otherwise, the fate of this kingdom and his destiny would be clear.